Welcome to the Blogging and SEO show. I'm Michaela, a stay-at-home mom of 3 who just happens to be in love with everything related to SEO, blogging, marketing, coffee, and shedding light into the many mystifying corners of search engine optimization and what that means for us service providers, small business owners, and even bloggers. We're ditching the do-it-all narrative surrounding SEO and blogging and just sitting down and crafting strategies that are sustainable but still get us those first page, long-lasting results. Now let's get cozy, grab your fave sweater and a cup of tea or coffee, and let's talk everything blogging and SEO. So hello, and welcome back to the Blogging and SEO show. Oh my goodness, I feel like this week has been so long. Also, let's just celebrate that this show has been around for a year. Tuesday was like my podcast anniversary. So this show has literally been going for a year, which is kind of crazy. But what better way to celebrate having a year-old podcast show than doing something special? All right. So this is kind of for my podcasters. So if you do not have a podcast, this probably isn't for you. But if you do have a podcast and you're like, well, dang, my episodes are really good, then keep listening. Like you're going to want to hear this. So let's talk about something that's probably been sitting on your to-do list for way too long. Turning your podcast into blog posts. And if you haven't even thought about it, let's start thinking about it because it's a really good way to get more out of the content that you already have. Because let's be honest, how many of your episodes are kind of just chilling there, full of great content, but not really reaching as many people as they could? Because whether or not your show is 20 episodes or you had 300 episodes, how many people are really going back to the very beginning and listening to them? Sometimes we have some episodes that are doing really well because they have really good show note SEO and, they'll show up on occasion and you're popping up in your podcast platforms and you do get a little bit that way. But ultimately, overall, you have a lot of episodes that are kind of being overlooked, even though the content was really good. And I get it. Writing blog posts from your podcast does sound really time consuming, a little bit overwhelming, and sometimes even a little unnecessary. But when you do this, the blog posts help new listeners find you and give your podcast a longer shelf life. Just as I was saying, how many people are really listening to those older podcast episodes? When you turn it into a blog post, you're extending its lifetime. It's not disappearing in a week. It's you're giving it the chance to be picked up by Google, shared, found over and over again. And if you're like, well, maybe not Google, it also gives you the opportunity to pin it to Pinterest, which also continues to work in the background. It's not a super active platform. You pin it and then you go. Of course, if you stay consistent, it still does better. The same with blogging. Like you stay consistent and it grows faster, but the little steps that you take here and there do still help. But that's exactly why I created the Pod to Blog Challenge. So this is a simple step-by-step process to finally start repurposing your episodes. And if you are currently repurposing your episodes, it's going to give you a little bit of clarity on the SEO portion and help you create a smoother, less time-consuming workflow, or a workflow that's going to get you better results. All right, so why bother turning your podcast into a blog post? We kind of talked about this, but let's break it down, okay? All right, so more people can find you. Google cannot listen to your podcast. It does not index your audio. It can technically rank your podcast based on whatever platform it's on, but it's not reading your audio. It is not crawling your audio to see what you're talking about. It is only going off of the show notes and the platform that it's on. But it can read a blog post, and it does over and over again. Blog posts bring in new listeners who are searching for the exact topics you're talking about. It's also going to diversify the type of listeners that you do have. Sometimes maybe you don't have a listener. Maybe it's going to be a reader. Maybe they love what you're talking about, but they don't have time to commit to listening to a podcast episode, and they need answers in the 3 minutes that they have available in the day instead of the 15 to 45 to, an hour long. Now, the second reason you might want to bother turning your podcast into a blog post is it's a way to get more out of the work you're already doing. You have already recorded the episode. Your content is done. When you repurpose it, you're getting more reach, more visibility, and more ways for people to engage with you. You're giving them multiple opportunities and diversifying the way that people can consume your content. And it's still the same content you've already created. Yes, there's a difference in how that content is presented, but it's the same core content. And what's crazy is you may even get multiple blog posts out of one podcast episode, especially if you are a podcaster with really long shows. And when you take those shows, especially if you're a podcaster with really long episodes, because when you take those episodes and you create multiple pieces of SEO content that's 3 or 2 or 1, it's many more ways for Google to find you and put you where you need to be, which is where your people are searching. And the final reason of why, you should really consider this is you don't have to do it alone and figure it out from scratch. I'm not saying jump in head first, start taking your transcript and digging through it or copy pasting your transcript or show notes. We're not going to do that. That's not strategic and it's not really going to get you the results that you want to see. And that's when it's going to start feeling like a waste of time. But with this challenge, we're going to prevent it from feeling overwhelming. I don't want you to feel like you're in a constant content creation mode. Yes, this will probably add time to your workflow if you've never done this before because it's a new task. But the goal is to make this an easy task. It's to make it a task that you're not resenting having to do every week. We want this to feel like you're making progress in your business and feel like it's not a chore, if that makes sense. But if you absolutely hate blogging, there's nothing I can do about that. I'll just make it you hate it a little bit less, or at least you'll love, the results that you can get from it. All right. So now that you know kind of the reason of why I want you to come into the challenge and I want you to really enjoy it, let's talk about what's actually in the challenge. So this is a 3-day challenge, but you're actually going to be welcomed into my little community on Monday. And the challenge will start on Tuesday, February 18th. But the reason this is because I want some time for us to chat a little bit, get comfortable with each other. And I also want to hear about your show because I want to make sure that the challenge is aligned with what your show is. So if we have a lot of podcasters who mainly focus on interviews, I want to make sure that I have some time to go over the different process of how an interview turns into a blog post versus a how-to podcast episode or a 3 ways podcast episode turns into a blog post. I want to make sure that, we can connect with your show and specifically so that you are getting what you need out of the challenge. So that's what we'll be doing that Monday. And then the day that the challenge actually kicks off, we're going to spend that day one just picking the right episode because this is really what's going to build your foundation of getting the most out of your content because not every episode needs to be a blog post. And that doesn't mean that the episode has to be a blog post in the first place. It could be a blurb, which we're going to cover in the challenge. But we're going to pick it so that you feel like you're getting the most. And even if this is the only podcast episode that you turn into a blog post and publish on your website, I want you to see the results from it. So that's why we're going to spend an entire day picking out the right episode. Day 2 is going to be the beginnings of the SEO stuff. It's where we're going to be finding your keyword and start thinking about what we're going to include in your podcast episode. And this deserves its own day because this is just as strategic as everything else. With podcast, you have a bit of a limitation on the keyword that you can find because you're starting from content that you already have. So you don't have as much wiggle room as if, you came up with an idea one day and you're like, I want to blog about it. Let me find some keywords that are kind of related to it. No, you already have made the content. So you have to find what aligns best with it, which means you might be searching through a few different keyword options. And so we're going to talk about how to find the one that's going to best fit you. Which one's going to get you the most bang for your buck, the most out of your time, the most ROI on this effort that you're putting in. And then we're also going to mention how that even goes into your blog post, how you're going to integrate it into the content you already have, because like I've been saying, you already have the episode. So we just have to make tweaks and optimize what you already have. All right, on day 3, that's when we're really going to be getting into structuring your post, making sure that it's good for readers and for SEO, because a big thing that I tend to see overlooked in this is our user experience. We have to think about our readers because we can put hours into creating the perfect podcast to blog post. We could spend hours optimizing this post and doing the absolute most. But if readers cannot consume it, they cannot read it, they click on it and they're just confused or overwhelmed and they decide to leave and go find a different blog post that's going to solve their issue, we're not going to see results. It's because they're not going to convert because they don't know what's going on. Google's not going to keep ranking you because the readers who are coming to your website are leaving so quickly. So obviously you wouldn't be the best choice for them to rank in search because they want people to stay on your website, because the better their results are for their users, the more their users are going to use their platform because they're trusting them. So we have to keep our readers in mind, even when we are optimizing for SEO. And we're also going to talk about the differences in your backend settings. So for your SEO settings, your meta descriptions, your URL, how you're even going to embed your episode for the best user experience. If you even need to embed your episode, why you wouldn't and why you would, and just different things like that. We're going to take through this process. So that would be our Thursday. That's our third day of the week. And then Friday, our community is still going to be open. If you have time to write it in that portion, then you can share it and we can look over it and kind of see what's happening. But that is the final day of the challenge. But we will still have the community open for that Friday so that you can still ask questions if you missed it, if you got sick, if you had to start a day late. That way, you can do it a little bit on your own time, even if it is a scheduled challenge, because I got kids. I get it. I woke up at 4:30 this morning thinking I was going to get a bunch of work done, and they decided that they were going to wake up at 5 o'clock. So I really do get it. So I wanted to make sure that you had enough time to do it on your own time if needed. And after the challenge, you will have access to your Notion hub, which will still have the private podcast episodes, because each day will have an episode dedicated to it. You will have the resources, you will have the links, and you will have the information to continue to use it or do it on your own time. But if you're thinking, I don't have time to write blog posts, that's why this challenge exists, and that's why it's bite-sized and actionable. It's designed to fit into your schedule. And like I just said, you're going to have a bit of wiggle room in when you want to complete it. Plus, repurposing is all about saving time, not adding more work. And yes, it might add a little bit more time because this is a new addition to your content creation workflow. We're going to do it as condensed as possible. And the more you do it, the less time it's going to take, because you're going to be into that workflow. And I'm not saying we have an XYZ workflow that you have to follow. I want you to take it and I want you to create something that feels best for you and that works with your brain. All right. So if you're thinking, well, I don't know anything about SEO, well, you don't need to be an SEO expert, and you also don't need to be an awesome writer. You just have to be an awesome podcaster. So I'll break it down in a way that makes sense over these 3 days. That's why we have 2 days that really do involve SEO, because I want you to get the most out of the work that you're doing. You really are creating this amazing content, and people deserve to see it for the longest time possible. And so that's what that SEO is going to do. And it's all about getting your content in front of the right people, in front of more people. And the thing is, there is still a portion of the US that doesn't even listen to podcasts. They don't touch it. Whereas 83% of internet users still consistently read blog posts in 2025. Your people deserve to learn from you. They deserve to see the content that you've spent this time to create. And it's good. You know that it's going to help them. This is just presenting it in another way that they can experience and find you. It's giving them another chance to meet you, to stick around, to want to work with you, and to learn and to feel that transformation that you provide. And if you're not a service provider, they can still buy your products. Or if you're looking for listens because maybe you want to monetize your podcast in the future, this is another way to get new listeners, because while most people do head to a blog post to read, it's because they're not aware your show exists. With this blog post, you would be introducing your show to a whole new section of the internet. There's all new people, and it truly is kind of game-changing. I hate to say game-changing, but it really can be when you stay consistent and you stick around and see those results. So now that you know what this challenge is about, and I've gone on my little rant, and we've spent this time because I really did want to break it down, and I feel like this has been a good breakdown of that. Here's what to do next. So if you want to join the challenge, and it is free, head to thecommamamaco.com/PTB-challenge and sign up. Once you're in, you'll get an email that has a little bit of breakdown of what to expect. And if you're closer to February 18th, you'll have an email giving you access to the challenge materials. It'll give you the instructions. It'll give you an approximated timeline on when you're going to get your materials. And it'll also just have a little introduction between, you and I, because I feel like we should get to know each other a little bit more before we kind of get into this little, challenge setting. Might as well. But you can also find the link in the show notes down below, of course. But just to sum it up, your podcast deserves to be seen, not just heard. Repurposing doesn't have to be hard or overwhelming. You just need a system. And if you want an easy, actionable way to start, the challenge is it. But that's it for today. Go sign up. I'll see you inside the challenge. And I really am super excited. There's already 57 podcasters in the challenge as of the time that I'm recording this, which is 9:35 a.m. And my goal is 100 podcasters. And I've listened to a few of the shows, and this is going to be so much fun. But until next week, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, reach out. My inbox is always open. I'm always active over on Threads. And yeah, see you next time. As always, I hope you were able to learn at least one new thing today and how you can apply it to your own business or blog. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Blogging and SEO Show. Don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss the next episode. I promise it's a goodie. And check the show notes for everything we talked about today. And come connect with me on Instagram at comamama.co. If you have any questions or thoughts you want to share, DM me. Let's chat. Until next time, talk soon.